Okay, boys and girls, Chapter 2. Hoo, hoo, hoo! For the next few weeks, I was more stressed than a castaway on Tomcat Island. It felt like the day of my flight would never arrive, but it finally did. I hopped in a taxi and left for the airport in plenty of time. I could hardly believe it was happening at last. I was going on vacation, a real vacation, and I was flying first class for free. I headed for the check-in counter of the airline I was flying, Mouse Air. A plush red carpet led to first-class check-in. I stepped onto it nervously. It felt so soft beneath my paws. I scampered up to the counter like a VIR, very important rodent. Mice in line for the economy check-in counter stared at me curiously and whispered, "Check out that mouse. He must be a VIR. Isn't that Geronimo Ch? Look, he's flying first class." The pretty mouse at the counter took my passport with a smile. She typed my name into the computer and stared at the screen. She glanced at me and then began banging at the keyboard, a perplexed expression on her snout. After another moment, she squeaked, "Mr. Stilton, there is nothing booked in your name." "Well, that's impossible," I protested. "I booked my flight with the Wander Rat." She nodded. "Yes, but your ticket was canceled. I'm sorry." I stepped away from the counter and pulled out my cell phone to call Ms. Sweetpaws. That's when the pretty mouse called, "Mr. Stilton, please wait a moment. Someone booked another ticket for you with Dirt Cheap Airlines. Here it is." I took the ticket. It was made of a tattered piece of tissue. I moved slowly away from the VIR window. I was totally mortified. I could hear all the mice around me whispering, "Isn't that Geronimo Ch? He's flying with Dirt Cheap Airlines. What a stingy mouse. Who'd have known?" Dragging my suitcase behind me, I scrambled to catch my flight. As I scampered along, panting, I wondered, who had canceled my first-class ticket? Who? A garbage can with wings. I boarded the plane and wedged myself next to a plump rodent wearing a cowboy hat pulled down over his eyes. I settled in and tried to calm down. Once I got to the Black Hills, I would be able to enjoy my relaxing vacation. No sooner had I finished that thought than the plane began to make a terrifying noise. I gulped and looked around. The airplane was in a state of total disrepair. The seat covers were torn. The springs had popped out of the cushions. The food tray wouldn't open, and the windows were filthy. On top of all that, there was no life jacket under the seat. Instead, there was an empty box that said, "You wanted to save $1. Well, too bad for you. In case of emergency, you're on your own." I checked to see if there were any paper bags in case I started to get an upset tummy. Naturally, there wasn't a single one. Instead, there was a note. "You wanted to save $1. Too bad for you. In case of motion sickness, you're on your own." This wasn't a plane. It was a garbage can with wings. I looked up and saw the flight attendant scowling at me. "You weren't about to complain, were you?" she growled. "No, everything is just swell," I stammered. The other passengers didn't seem to notice the plane's shoddy condition or the terrible sounds coming from its engine. They were all snoozing. Unbelievable. The plane was speeding along, about to take off. I gulped and grabbed the armrests. One of them broke off in my paw. Eek! This was going to be a long, long flight. Holy cheese. I was right about that. As soon as we were in the air, the rodent next to me took off his hat and shouted, "Surprise!" It was my cousin Trap. That was the signal to the other 6 passengers. They removed their cowboy hats too, squeaking, "Surprise!" It was my sister Thea from my friend Petunia Prettypaws, her niece, Bugsy Wugsy, my nephew, Benjamin, my good friend Bruce Hyena, and my grandfather William Shortpaws. I looked at them dumbfounded. What are you doing here? Trap laughed smugly. Hey, Germeister, how do you like our little surprise? It's all my doing. When I heard you were leaving for a relaxing vacation all by your lonesome, I canceled your ticket and booked a flight for all of us. On your dime, of course. Aren't you excited, Cousin Kins? Then he lowered his squeak. This relaxation is just a ruse, you see. You and I have a top-secret mission. We're going to look for treasure in the Black Hills. But don't squeak a word to anyone about it. So here's his whole family. Surprise, surprise, surprise. He thought he was getting away. Oh, dear. Did you like my surprise? I was struck squeakless. When I finally found my voice, I stammered. You did. Before I could finish my thought, the flight attendant interrupted. Stop whining and sit down. We're about to start rocking and rolling. What? Dancing on an airplane? I assumed she was kidding, but at that moment the plane started to go up and down, and 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 up and down. I could feel the cheddar croissant I had had for breakfast rising in my throat. Chewy cheese chunks. I felt so sick, I forgot to ask Trap about the treasure in the Black Hills and why it was such a big secret. As usual, Trap was as cool as cottage cheese. He never got sick. He settled into his seat and started leafing through a catalog he'd found in his seat pocket. I glanced over his shoulder. It seemed to advertise some very weird stuff. I was worried. What was my cousin up to? I sighed. My tummy was doing too many somersaults for me to investigate now, but I knew I'd find out sooner or later.